And we're really here today to talk about why the court of public opinion matters and things that go on outside of the courtroom are really impactful in driving value in a restructuring case. And that's because, well, this entire room understands distress, understands M&A, understands what a bankruptcy means and doesn't mean. The average person out there doesn't.
Look, I think the way that we think about it is anytime you approach a big restructuring, you want to assemble the best team, right? So what do we see in all these situations?
Hello there, M&A Advisor community. This is Roger Aguinaldo, and welcome back to the M&A Advisor podcast. Since 1998, the M&A Advisor's mission is to recognize achievements, provide thought leadership, and connect professionals in mergers and acquisitions for the purpose of improving your deal-making craft and accelerating your deal flow. We are so glad you're joining us for this insightful and inspiring podcast conversation curated for mergers and acquisitions professionals. Whether you're an aspiring deal maker, a seasoned professional, or just curious about the world of mergers and acquisitions, you'll find something valuable and relevant in our podcast. Our goal is to bring you the best insights, stories, and tips from the experts who've been there and done that, so you can learn from their successes and mistakes and take your deal-making skills to the next level. But before we dive into today's episode, we have a small favor to ask you. If you enjoy listening to our podcast and find it useful, please consider following us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and subscribing to our M&A Alerts newsletter. You can find the links in the description below. This will help us reach more people like you and grow our community of M&A professionals. It will also let us know that you appreciate our work and want us to keep producing more quality content for you. Plus, you'll never miss an episode, and you'll always be in the loop with the latest trends in the M&A world to improve and accelerate your deal making. So please follow us. You are the reason we do what we do, and we couldn't do it without you. And now for today's podcast.
I would like to welcome David J. Cohen and Luke Wolf to the stage. David is a partner in the restructuring department and co-managing partner in Miami at Weil, and he will be in conversation with Luke Wolf. Luke is a managing director of strategic communications at C Street Advisory Group, and they are going to be discussing winning in the court of public opinion, why communications matter in restructurings. If we can give them a round of applause, please. Come on. You just had lunch. You should have a little energy. There is still coffee back there if you need it.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here. We are incredibly excited to speak with you all and follow the incredibly big footsteps that we are with that fantastic panel. And for a quick background, my name is Luke Wolf. I'm a managing director at C Street Advisory Group. We are a strategic communications firm focused on helping companies, sponsors, lenders who are navigating M&A transactions, distress situations, restructurings, and other special situations. And I'm thrilled to be joined here today by David Cohen, who is a partner in Weil's Restructuring Group, runs the Miami office down here, and has worked on several of the biggest, most high-profile restructurings in and out of court over the past few years. And we're really here today to talk about why the court of public opinion matters and things that go on outside of the courtroom are really impactful in driving value in a restructuring case. And that's because, well, this entire room understands distress, understands M&A, understands what a bankruptcy means and doesn't mean. The average person out there doesn't. And the average person out there thinks that bankruptcy probably means liquidation or something else. So it's incredibly important that you have a real plan to talk to, whether it's your employees, your customers, your vendors, your partners, your investors, about the entire process. And one of the key points is that it starts long before an announcement, that a press release is just one tool. But if you're not communicating throughout the entire process, whether that starts with the first forbearance agreement, the first leak, the first time that you have to put out an AK, you're already behind the eight ball. So we're going to get into all of that today. And David, would love for you to start by talking about how you see it playing out, talking to management teams, and how the cooperation between legal and communications can really be very impactful during the case.
Yeah, thank you very much for that intro. And I just want to say I agree wholeheartedly with the Southern District of Florida being the real Southern District. As a new member of the bar here, thank you. Having just used my Florida bar card for the first time, very excited to be here with a great group of professionals that have been here for a long time and that are joining the community here. So very excited about that. In terms of communications advisors and legal advisors working together, look, I think the way that we think about it is anytime you approach a big restructuring, you want to assemble the best team, right? So what do we see in all these situations? Typically now you have independent directors and you always have a team of advisors that involves a banker, a financial advisor, and a restructuring counsel. And, I view a communications advisor as sort of being a core and important member of that team. Really somebody that in, the tough situations that we have to deal with, should be there early on and at the table. Before you sort of get too far down a path, start to lose control of the message. I think like any group of advisors, having regular calls, having everybody together, so that frankly the communications advisor can stay abreast of what's happening and know how to manage the message and sort of embracing them as part of the core team, I think is a really, critical strategy. And frankly, empowering the communications advisor or other people on the team for being a centralized focus of communication. So we assemble a team, we make sure the investment banker is sort of the core point of contact for any communications with investors, with lenders, making sure that the communications advisor is the core point of contact for media, and otherwise really training up, the management team to be able to communicate effectively with vendors, employees, and other stakeholders. So, by having kind of the professionals that know how to do this, have been through this, these kind of situations time and time again, you sort of put yourself in the best position for success to keep a lid on things. I mean, I think a good example is, we worked on the Brooks Brothers bankruptcy, sort of when COVID hit. And I'm sure everybody in this room, dealt with similar situations where on a day-to-day basis, you didn't know what to communicate to your customers, what to communicate to your vendors, what to communicate to your employees, and sort of having that day-to-day contact, I think was, really important and effective, and something that, we recommend in every situation.
That's great. And those retail cases are especially difficult from a communications lens because there are so many stakeholders and they're so public. So something like Brooks Brothers, where it's an iconic American brand, that's going to be written about in the press. And not only the employees in the stores, but everyone is going to understand that there is a bankruptcy going on. So how do you communicate through that? And that's really what we view our job as, is serve as translators during the process. So the same way that lawyers, bankers, financial advisors, they're working on the operational, financial, and legal side, we help translate that to all the other stakeholder audiences. So how do you make sure that customers, vendors, employees understand what's going on either prior to a filing, during a filing, and also importantly afterwards when you emerge from the process? And that is both making sure that the legal process reflects in communications, but also that communications can help inform, legal documents and what's going on there too. So given today's media landscape, what we found is that legal documents are one of the few less trusted places that people turn, where maybe they can't trust the media, can't trust social media, but they trust things that are filed on dockets. They trust things that are filed with the SEC. So we also take a communications lens to those documents and say, how can we use these as tools, not only to communicate to the court and to financial partners, but also to get across our communications objectives. Just one example of this is we were working on a case, and to get relief from the court, it was incredibly important to show the company was in very dire liquidity straits. And to do so, the lawyers drafted a motion that did just that. And it very dramatically showed that this company was on their last legs and just on a shoestring budget. But we knew that if that got out there, that the employees, customers, vendors, all their other partners would be spooked. So we had to work with the lawyers to say, what's another way we can accomplish this goal without having a detrimental impact to the operational side and the employee side. So I think not only is it thinking about communications documents, but also how legal documents are tools for communications and how those are equally read, whether it's in the docket or public filings. But I also want to talk about stakeholder dynamics. And of course, during a case, there are a lot of different stakeholder dynamics at play. I think one of the more underappreciated ones is on the lender side, and how they also are incredibly important and sometimes a thorn in the side from a communication standpoint. So can you share more about what tools are available to help manage those lender dynamics? Do they work, and how you think about managing the lender side of the equation from a communications lens?
Yeah, I mean, look, anytime you're approaching a restructuring or a liability management exercise, or any really going to talk to your lenders about anything of forbearance, um, you got to make sure that those conversations are going to be held in close confidence. And obviously, we all use non-disclosure agreements and confies to accomplish those goals. And um, I think people say often, like, just negotiate the NDA, sign whatever. It's not like anybody's ever really enforces them. When's the last time anybody sued under an NDA? But what we found is in these situations, the distress situations, it's kind of more important than ever to have people, really locked up. Obviously with normal confidentiality provisions, with standstill provisions, non-solicit provisions when you have, a lender that's coming in and looking to potentially take the keys. You want to make sure they're not out there talking to your, suppliers and employees, but also just not talking to other lenders, right? There's all these dynamics now in the market of different lender groups popping up, getting in cooperation agreements, really to make it so that the company can't use sort of, different lender dynamics from different lenders with different interests to sort of prevent the company from doing a transaction. I mean, while we worked on, one of the earlier and more prominent liability management transactions, which was CERTA. And I think, the NDA negotiation in that instance lasted like a month, because we knew we had multiple creditor groups that were competing to provide financing to the company. And what we had to make sure was that those groups weren't going to talk to each other. And so if we were going to have an NDA with this group, they were going to have a no talk that said they can't talk to anybody else. And that was really, you find yourself in these situations as a distressed company, you don't have a lot of leverage. Your leverage is really to create competition amongst different groups of stakeholders. And if you can separate them and isolate them using those sort of legal tools, that can be really effective. Now that's become a lot harder, I think, with different groups coming together, getting cooperation agreements. People are pushing back very hard on things like no talks, that they don't get to actually, speak to one another. So that's become more challenging as people have gotten more sophisticated about how to prevent companies from having them, play off one another. But it's something that we try to do. Obviously you also use the NDA to just prevent leaks. I think, groups are getting together, much earlier than they ever have before. Scott Greenberg's got a pitch book, for every company in America that he's ready to roll out when it's 3 years away from a trigger event. But those groups are forming early on. And if you've got a healthy performing business and you're trying to, just enhance your balance sheet and have a conversation, you want to be able to do that without that being leaked in the media. That is often hard to control. I think, I don't know who does it, but there's people out there, speaking to Reorg Research and DebtWire. And I don't know if you could ever completely control that, but we try to do the best we can.
Yeah, we're working on a deal now, and the director said it's almost as if the media is in the room with us with the lenders. So I think that's often the dynamic that we're facing, working often with companies or sponsors, is even though there are NDAs in place when we're communicating information, we very quickly, hours, days after, get the call from a Reorg or a Bloomberg or a Wall Street Journal, and it's about how do you manage those situations. What we found is that upwards of 80% of deals we work on, there's some leak in the press prior to an announcement. So we view it much more a matter of when, not if something's going to leak. But if the first time you're thinking about leak preparedness is when you just got a call, then you're behind the eight ball and you're too late. So really that process started much before, assuming that you will get that call at some point, but you already know what you're going to say to your customers, to your vendors, and to the media. So given that, we don't think the media should be kind of the enemy here. They're someone that you need to work with. That if they have good information, they are going to report it. There's dedicated teams of restructuring reporters, distressed debt reporters at all the big publications. So there's going to be coverage, especially of the more high-profile situations. But how do you make sure that you're working with that media source and media outlet to get the story right? because while it may start behind a paywall somewhere just for the people in this room, it very quickly ends up in the trade publication that all of your customers read, or in the local publication where you have a plant. Now all your employees are reading about you in distress or considering a bankruptcy or talking to your lenders. And if you're not ready to talk to them about what that means, and just as importantly, doesn't mean for the business and their jobs or their payables, then that's how you get deterioration and a loss of value. So our view is that prior to kind of any of these things becoming to the public and coming to the media is when you already need to have a plan and ready to engage both on the media side and the stakeholder side.
Yeah, and obviously we've been talking about, I think, controlling leaks, managing these stakeholders sort of pre any bankruptcy filing out of court to sort of preserve, the business. But in court, I think sometimes it can be really hard as well. And you asked about legal tools we use. I mean, mediation orders, that we see in cases where you sort of have the judge, the bankruptcy judge refer the matter to another one of the judges on the bench, and you get a really strong, federal court order that says, not only is everything here confidential, but it's also privileged. And it really sort of lets parties open up, talk to each other, and look, that doesn't guarantee that people aren't going to be leaking things, to the media as well that happen in that room. But when you're in an ongoing mediation with the federal judge and you've got a federal court order, I think that scares people a little bit more when something that's talked about in that room makes its way into the press. And, we found that that's a really effective tool as well.
Yeah, and I know that in the past few months and years, you've been working on a very high-profile case in Stewart, which has gotten a ton of media attention and also a lot of stakeholder management. Maybe you could talk for a minute about that case and some of the unique dynamics there from a communication standpoint.
Yeah, so I would say the Stewart healthcare case is probably about as challenging as they come from, managing the media communications perspective. It's sort of been the founder's persona non grata from day one, and the company, had basically been dragged through the mud. I mean, we had, deteriorating hospitals that were, there was one up in Brevard County close by that I think had a bat infestation that the Wall Street Journal talked about. We had a colorful founder who, was subpoenaed to Congress and then didn't show up and was recommended for criminal charges. And, the list goes on and on about sort of the salacious stories in that case. And, I think in most cases that we work on, you're focused on how do we manage the message of, we're really here to do a balance sheet restructuring or sell the business as a going concern and get into safe hands. Here we were dealing with, allegations of foreign, corruption and criminality and, people not showing up to Congress. And so, we made a pretty conscious decision that, we weren't going to engage on any of those, sorts of stories or comment on them or try to control it. And, we were going to use the bankruptcy court as the forum for, what we were really trying to do, which is we had a group of experienced, trusted advisors, new independent directors that were really focused on saving, 30,000 jobs in 8 states across the country and 30 hospitals, which we had to do. And, it was impossible, frankly, to control it when I was presenting in Houston, seeking approval of a closure of a hospital in Boston. And at the same time, the CEO was in Versailles at the 2024 Paris Olympics, watching his horses, compete. So sometimes I think, the story, you just can't control it. I think that's the lesson from that one. And you sort of try to focus on the positive things that you're doing in the situation and highlight those through press releases and highlight some of the good stories in court. We had, certain executives that were going out of pocket to buy medicine for the hospitals when the company didn't have liquidity. And so try to refocus people's attention from the negativity of the allegations against a few individuals to the, all the good things about our process and what it can accomplish and providing people another chance. So, we actually didn't have a communications firm in that case. I think we really could have used one. The person that was the head of the communications for the company was actually also head of communications at Purdue. So she was pretty experienced, and there's definitely some people in management that you tend to see on multiple cases and you follow those people around, but it was a really challenging situation. Be interested to see what you guys would have done there. But I know you worked on WeWork, which is a big one, and it also had its challenges.
Yeah, different example. I think when we got into WeWork, there was already so much written about it. There were multiple Netflix series, so we kind of came in prior to the filing, but at a time they were trying to redefine themselves as a company and really move beyond Adam Newman, of course, as the founder, who was such connected to the brand and who they were. And then, of course, going into the restructuring, which was not only a very complicated financial restructuring, but also more than 500 global lease negotiations, very complicated from an operational standpoint. And the real goal there was, how do you make sure that their members, those who are showing up every day, continue to have a belief and trust in the brand and want to continue to show up and grow their businesses with WeWork? So we knew that everyone was going to write about this case and cover it, so that we had to be proactive and very direct with this audience. So we, on day one of the case, aligned with all the first petitions, had exclusive stories in financial press, trade press, local press. We had the CEO make a member video, which was sent to hundreds of thousands of members around the world, to make sure that they heard from WeWork directly about what this process would do for them, and that was part of a long-term plan to position them for success. So I think that sort of proactive approach is probably more unusual in Chapter 11, when most companies are more reactive. But we think in certain situations, it's important to get out there, because we know that something like WeWork, everyone's going to write about it. So if you're not defining the story for yourself, it creates a vacuum for others to define it for you. And whether that's the press to step in, and if you're not working with them, then they might only have half the story, or also your competitors who are going to step in and say, oh, they're bankruptcy, they're not going to make it, that's why you should work with us. So our general perspective is that in these things which are going to get covered, going to get talked about, you need to be on your front foot and telling the story that you want to share, and make sure it's fully aligned with everything going on in court, but not create that vacuum as much as possible. I think we only have a minute or two left, so I'd love to open up for any questions. If not, we'll do a little rapid fire here, but any questions from the audience? All right.
Hit with the rapid fire.
All right. So we have some quick rapid fire questions, which we'll run through. So the first one is a true false, that staying quiet is better than communicating before you have all the answers.
I think it's true when you don't have the answers. I mean, I think you can often get the answers pretty quickly when you have a talented, group of people around. But, I'll use the Stewart example again. You get a media inquiry and it says, what can you comment on this story about the CEO using these funds to, give to his, kid's private school, and you can't figure out where the money came from. And so in those scenarios, better to stay no comment.
Yeah, that's a messy one. It's probably also no comment.
Yeah.
The next one, engaging with the media during a restructuring presents more risks than rewards.
I think that's false. I mean, I think when you have people who have the right connectivity and the relationships, they can really help, manage the message. Again, this is when the media is not just completely trying to torch you at every single opportunity, but when it's, a more regular case or something that's manageable, I think with the assistance of the right folks, engaging is often going to be better than not.
Great. And I think last one would be, leaks are inevitable. The job is to control the narrative, not stop the leak.
I think that's false. I mean, we obviously, you try to control the narrative when you do get a leak, but I think there's a lot of process that you can put in place when you get involved in a situation. I mean, one of the first things that we do with any company we talk to is put together a communications protocol. You want to limit the people that are sort of quote unquote under the tent at the company. We talk a lot to board members and management about keeping things tight, and one of the number one rules is like, don't text. Bad things happen when people text, and so I think there's a lot that you could do when you're involved in a situation to control it. So I think that one's true.
Free piece of communications advice. Don't put anything in writing, all over the phone. I think most lawyers would probably agree with that too. But anyways, I think we'll wrap it up there. David, thank you. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something new from it. If you have any questions or comments for us or any of our guests, please feel free to leave them in the podcast platform of your choice or send us an email at editor@maadvisor.com. We would love to hear from you and get your feedback. And if you haven't done so already, please follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and subscribe to our M&A Alerts newsletter at the links in the description or on our website at www.maadvisor.com. This will help you stay updated on the latest M&A interviews and trends and support our podcast to grow and reach more listeners like you. This is Roger Aguinaldo, the creator and founder of the M&A Advisor. Thank you for tuning in and being part of our M&A Advisor community. Until next time, stay safe and happy dealing.